Yo, 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 what is up, YouTube? BK Brad Kellner. Today is Thursday, October 14th, 2021. 2 days away from Texas and Oklahoma State at DKR Texas Memorial Stadium in Austin. The Longhorns currently a 5-point favorite against the Pokes. Oklahoma State coming to town unbeaten, 5-0 this season. They're also coming off a bye. They did not play last week, so well rested coming into Austin for this game against the Longhorns. We're live on YouTube, so if you're watching this live, feel free to comment your questions, your thoughts about this matchup between the Horns and the Pokes. And if you're not watching this live, no problem. Comment below with anything that's on your mind, Texas football related. Please like this video. Please subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so already. Make sure you tap that notification bell too, so you're always informed whenever I release new content. Texas currently a 5-point favorite against Oklahoma State. Of course, the big storyline from the Texas side, can the Longhorns put back the disastrous meltdown behind them? We all know what went down last weekend at the Cotton Bowl. Can Texas turn the page and bounce back against a very, very good Oklahoma State football team? The first time the Longhorns lost this year, they bounced back in a big-time way, right? They smashed Rice 58-0 the following week after the Arkansas loss. Then they put up a 70 spot against Texas Tech. They went on the road and beat TCU in Fort Worth. A game wasn't perfect, we know that, but any win against TCU you'll take, considering how much the Longhorns have struggled against Gary Patterson in the past. So Texas put together a modest little 3-game win streak after its first loss. Now the Longhorns have to try to do the same and bounce back from some adversity once again after what went down in the fairgrounds last weekend. And Oklahoma State, once again, a very big football team. Not broadcasting from my bathroom. Might need to pick a new broadcast location. Shannon, you're the second person in as many live videos that I've done to ask if I'm broadcasting from the bathroom. Not the bathroom. This is my bedroom. Got like curtains to a window. We've got like a desk set up behind me and in front of me. It does look like a bathroom, though, with all the white. And this does kind of look like a shower curtain. So I understand that. That's pretty funny. Not broadcasting from the bathroom, although in years past, in apartments past, I have broadcasted these videos from my bathroom. Conversation for another day. So Oklahoma State comes to town, guys, and this is not your older brother's Oklahoma State football team. The strength of this team is its defense. When you think Mike Gundy, when you think Oklahoma State, you think offense. You think superstars at skill position spots. You think a lot of points. You think air raid principles. You think up-tempo. You think 50-40 type of football games. That's not this year's Oklahoma State football team. That wasn't really the case with last year's OSU team either. Definitely not the case with the Pokes in 2021. The strength of this team is their defense. They allow just 18.6 points per game. They're top 20 in the country in total defense and a bunch of other defensive statistical categories as well. They've got the best third down defense in the Big 12, one of the best third down Ds in the country. And Steve Sarkisian said it at his game week press conference on Monday. Mike Gundy is kind of reinventing the Cowboys, and he's right. Once again, this is not the Oklahoma State team that we're accustomed to seeing. This is not your stereotypical run-and-gun Big 12 OSU team. Defense is the strength, and they kind of rely on the running game offensively. They don't have that stud quarterback, that Mason Rudolph, that Brandon Weeden, that Zach Robinson to call the shots offensively. They don't have a Dez Bryant or a Justin Blackmon or a Tylan Wallace on the outside. They don't have Chuba Hubbard anymore. But they still have some good players, and they still do a lot of things really, really well. And defensively, they're good. They were a really good defense last year, gave up 23 points per game, and they had most of their starters coming back this year from last year's team. Of course, they benefited, just like everybody benefited, from the COVID eligibility waiver. Some fifth-year guys, some very experienced players on that OSU defense, and some guys who are going to be playing on Sundays. They've got a lot of talent there, and I'll give their defensive coordinator, Jim Knowles, I don't think he's related to Beyonce at all. And just based off looks, I don't want to judge a book by its cover, but based off looks, I don't think there's any sort of relationship there. But Jim Knowles has been there since 2018, and OSU's defense has gotten better every single year. In a perfect world, Mike Gundy can score a bunch of points and has an offense that looks like some of his offenses in years past, but that's not the case with Spencer Sanders and OSU on that side of the football this season. Their defense is carrying the weight. Jim Knowles' defense has gotten better every single year since he's been in Stillwater, and that's the case here in 2021. Oklahoma State's been an interesting team this year. I'll get to some of y'all's comments in a second, but just a quick little breakdown on the Pokes before we get to some questions and y'all's comments and really dive into this matchup. Got about 25 minutes for this video. Then I'm going to go record the 1-0 podcast with Joe Cook of Inside Texas. So that'll be dropping tonight. Make sure y'all check that out too, wherever you get your podcast. But Oklahoma State's gotten better as the year has gone along. They struggled against Missouri State, like FCS Missouri State in week 1 in Stillwater. They won that game by a touchdown. Didn't have Spencer Sanders in that game, but still, they should have been able to handle Mo State a lot easier than they did. Then they barely beat Tulsa in week 2, another one-possession game at home against a far inferior opponent. But then the schedule got tougher and Oklahoma State got better. They went on the road to the Smurf Turf in Boise, Idaho, Albertson Stadium, and they beat Boise State 21-20. They actually pitched a second-half shutout in that game. Neither team scored a point in the second half. It was 21-20 at halftime, and OSU won the game by a final of 21-20. So that's an impressive win. Boise State, a decent football team. They just beat BYU, top 10 BYU last week. And anybody who's kept up with college football over the years knows how tough it is to win a game in Boise, Idaho. So that was a nice win. And then the Pokes got into conference play. They're 2-0. They beat K-State and Baylor, both at home. But K-State, a decent football team. Baylor was ranked and undefeated going into that game in Stillwater a couple of weeks ago. Actually, K-State was ranked too at the time when Oklahoma State beat them. So a couple of quality wins. I'll say a few quality wins for Oklahoma State to this point in the season. We'll see what happens this weekend in Austin. Once again, the Longhorns, a 5-point favorite. Texas has won 2 in a row against Oklahoma State. Last year's matchup was an instant classic. The overtime 40-34 victory in Stillwater. Joseph Osai had one of the best defensive performances I've ever seen from anyone, like not just a Texas player, but from anyone. He did things last year against the Pokes that hadn't been done in the Big 12 since he who shall not be named. I'm going to name him so y'all know who I'm talking about. And Ndamukong Suh. Like what Osai did last year in Stillwater was akin to some of the performances that Ndamukong Suh had back when Nebraska was in the Big 12 and back when he was still playing at Nebraska. Osai was dominant in that game. Obviously, you don't have him this year. The offense was bad. You hear the score, 40-34. You're like, oh, the offense must have been really good. The offense struggled big time. Texas benefited from 4 OSU turnovers. They turned that into 20 points. And also, Deshaun Jameson had a 100-yard kickoff return for a touchdown in that game as well. So wouldn't mind seeing that again this year, this time around against the Pokes. But, yeah, it was more the defense and special teams carrying the weight for the Longhorns last year than the offense being super impressive. And I don't know how much faith anybody has in this Texas defense right now after what took place against Oklahoma last weekend. So it's kind of strength on strength, weakness on weakness, guys. Like the Texas strength right now is clearly its offense, number 1 scoring offense in the Big 12 at 48 points per game. The strength of Oklahoma State right now is its defense. They're number 3 in the conference in scoring defense, but 18 points a game. Pretty impressive, right? 30-point margin between these two teams in terms of what they average. So strength on strength, Texas offense versus OSU defense, and kind of weakness on weakness with the OSU offense going up against the Longhorn defense. All right, I'll check some of y'all's comments real quick before we move on here. Appreciate y'all stopping by. I know it's the middle of the day, kind of a weird time, but thank you guys for giving me some time. And if you're not watching this live, appreciate you watching this video, regardless of when you're checking it out. I don't see OSU's offense being able to keep up. Yeah, I mean, if Texas offense looks as good as it's looked for the most part in the Big 12 and really for the most part this season, then it is going to be tough for Oklahoma State to score with Texas. But Oklahoma State's defense is very, very good. Now, Oklahoma's defense last week was pretty good and was doing a lot of good things going into that game against the Longhorns. And Texas's offense, despite the second half struggles, we know about that. But you put up 48 points, that means you did a lot of things right. And Texas did a lot of things right offensively. So I do think this is the toughest test that Oklahoma State's defense has had to go up against this year. I think Texas is the best team that OSU's had to play. I mentioned they've got a couple of quality wins under their belt, but I think Texas is better than Baylor. I think Texas is better than Kansas State. I think Texas is better than this year's version of Boise State. So I do think, especially offensively, this is the best team that OSU has seen in 2021. And if Texas does what it has done on offense for most of the season, then yeah, it's going to be tough. Like if this game turns into a track meet, Texas is going to win. If the game's played in the teens or 20s, can't imagine it's played in the teens, but if it's played in the 20s, then that's where Oklahoma State wants the football game, and they've got a good chance to pull off an upset. Even though they're the higher ranked team, they are the Vegas underdog. My buddy Will in the building. What's up, Will? What would UT's record be if Bijan Robinson shot lasers out of his eyes? At times I feel like he does. Times I feel like he's pretty superhuman. But if he actually could shoot lasers out of his eyes and like those lasers could kill defensive players, I think Texas would be undefeated. They'd win every game because there'd be nobody to stop that guy. So what a question. I'm going undefeated to national champs if Bijan somehow gets that ability. That's like the one ability that he doesn't have at this point. Joel Klatt says Bijan is the best player in college football, and he has his Heisman vote. I think you can make a strong argument that Bijan Robinson is the best player in the country. He's the best running back in college football without question. I know Oklahoma State kind of stymied him a little bit, but he still went for 130 plus against a defense that held Letty Brown and Deuce Vaughn in check, big time check. And Bijan, a bad game for him, was going for $130 plus against a very, very good defensive front and a very good rush defense in general in Oklahoma. And oh, by the way, I think everybody knows that Texas's offensive line isn't that good. So most of what Bijan has done this year has been just Bijan being Bijan. He's awesome. And I don't blame Joel Klatt at all. A lot of people think Joel Klatt is anti-Texas bias. So for him to say something like that, he means it. And Bijan's a pretty damn good football player. So Bijan's got to be in that conversation. If Texas won that game last week, that would have helped. If Bijan went for 200 like he did against TCU and Texas Tech, that would have also helped. But he still needs to be in the discussion right now. And if Texas wins football games, if Texas gets to Arlington and Bijan puts up the numbers that he's been putting up, then yeah, Bijan's got a good chance to at least get to New York. I don't know if he's going to win the Heisman, but he's at least got a shot to be a finalist if Texas can win some football games and Bijan can continue to do what we've seen him do more often than not. He did not play well against Oklahoma State last year, by the way. Texas did not run the football well at all against the Pokes. I've got the numbers written down somewhere on my phone here. Bijan last year actually was his first start as a Texas Longhorn. Thanks, Tom Herman. 13 carries for 59 yards in the game against the Pokes. Texas as a team ran for just 118 yards on 3 yards per carry against the Cowboys last year. So different coach, different offense. Bijan's a different player. But last year, Oklahoma State did a good job against the Texas rushing attack. And Oklahoma State did a good job against Texas's offense last year in general. Texas was 2 for 15 on third down against the Pokes last season. 2 for 15. Of course, different coach, different offense, different everything with both of these football teams. But the Longhorns had some trouble against OSU last week. Dorian Johnson, what's up, Dorian? Yeah, got to get this one. I mean, if you want to get to Arlington, I don't want to say you have zero margin for error because I don't think anybody outside of Oklahoma is going to have only one loss or less in the Big 12 this year. But you lose this game, you've got no margin for error if you do lose this game. And you still have some tough games ahead. Road trips to Baylor and Morgantown. Neither of those teams are that good. Texas will be favored against both of those teams, but you never know. K-State coming to town a little bit later in the year. Every team feels beatable in the Big 12 this season. You don't want to be at a point 4 games into conference play to where you can't afford another loss. I do think Texas can lose one more game this season and still get to the Big 12 championship, but you don't want to risk it. And once again, you don't want to put yourself in a spot where you have no margin for error with still more than half of the conference slate to go. And you've got a bye week after this, too. You'd love to go into the bye week with the win. Good point, CB. Good point, CB. For Oklahoma State, guys, once again, a different OSU team than we're used to. I got to talk about Spencer Sanders. I mean, Oklahoma State's offense, once again, you're used to Mike Gundy teams being able to put up 40 seemingly at will. That's not the case this year. OSU is 9th in the Big 12 in scoring offense, and Spencer Sanders is still a wild card. We've been saying that for a while because it's been the case for a while. Year 3 for Spencer Sanders. He's done a lot of good things, but he's done more bad than good during his college career, only completing 58% of his passes, 5 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. He threw 3 picks in OSU's last game against Baylor. Oklahoma State should have killed Baylor. But because Spencer Sanders kept turning the ball over, Baylor kept it close, and that was a competitive game for a long time. Oklahoma State clearly better. Their defense was dominant against Baylor's offense, but Spencer Sanders just kept gifting him the ball like Christmas came early in Stillwater. 3 picks in that game. He was 6 for 13 for 82 yards in Oklahoma State's win against Boise State. He still is one of the most, if not the most inconsistent quarterbacks in the country. So he's a wild card. And if Texas's defense, they're going to have to bounce back. but they were relatively opportunistic against Oklahoma, really against Spencer Rattler. They've been opportunistic at times, a decent amount of takeaways this season. If they can get some of those and create some short fields for this offense going up against a stout OSU defense, that's going to be huge. Turnover margin, always key, but you're going up against a guy who's going to gift you at least one, I think, this weekend. Once again, 4 turnovers for the Pokes against the Longhorns last season. I think Spencer Sanders had 3, if not all 4 of them. So he's a wild card. But Oklahoma State, they try to take the pressure off of Spencer Sanders. Like, Mike Gundy's a good coach. He knows that Spencer Sanders can cough it up from time to time. So they've been relying on their running game heavy. Don't tell Gary Patterson this, but Jalen Warren, OSU's #1 running back, has 95 carries in the last 3 weeks. 95 carries in the last 3 weeks alone. So they have been feeding their senior running back, the guy who was one of the backups to Chuba Hubbard last year. Jalen Warren's not Chuba Hubbard, but he's pretty good, and he's gotten better, and the Pokes have been relying upon him more this year, or as of late, I should say, than what they were doing at the start of the season. So the run game's the identity of their offense. They've got a cool diamond formation that we might see this weekend. I would love Texas to incorporate a diamond formation type of look. The diamond formation basically has Spencer Sanders under center or in shotgun, and he's got 3 backs, like 1 on each side and a back behind him. 3 backs on the field at one time. Dude, if Sark did that with Bijan, Rojo, and Keelan, I might have to change pants, man. I'd love to see that. I want those guys on the field as often as possible, especially without Jordan Whittington, right? I mean, get those skill guys, get those backs on the field as often as you can to try to make life miserable for Oklahoma State's defense. OSU's offensive line is pretty good. Like, you hear about the Sanders turnover issues, and you're like, well, their O-line must suck. He must be running for his life. Not really the case. Only 6 sacks surrendered through 5 games for Oklahoma State, and Texas's pass rush has not been very good. Talked about the game Joseph Osai had against OSU last year. He's not there. There's nobody close to that for Texas right now. And Jacoby Jones, who might be the closest thing to that on the edge for Texas, he's out indefinitely. Got hurt in the Oklahoma game. So, yeah, I don't like, that's a key matchup. You guys know how I feel about the trenches. You guys know that I feel that every football game is won and lost at the line of scrimmage. I don't have a lot of faith in Texas's offensive or defensive lines right now, and Oklahoma State has pretty good units up front. So that'll be a test. We need to see a lot more than what we saw in the second half against OU last week for Texas to do what it wants to do on both sides of the football. Let's see. All right, I'll check some of y'all's comments. I've been talking too much. My bad, guys. Got about 10 minutes left. So any questions, any comments, any score predictions, whatever y'all got for me, hit me up in the live chat. Once again, if you're watching this video after the fact, thank you for watching. Comment below if you want, and I'll try to respond to your comments in a timely manner. Check out Fanatic Perspectives preview, by the way. Steven and Tran just did a video. I was waiting for them to finish their premiere before I started going live on this one. So definitely check out their content. All of the YouTube Longhorn content. Everything's pretty good. Bunch of good dudes putting out great content, talking Texas sports on this website. Yes, a lot of big-time recruits coming to town. Arch Manning will be here. Man, I should have had this ready, and I might do this for tomorrow's video, more of a focus on recruiting and all of the recruits that are coming to town this weekend. But, yeah, a lot of big-time recruits for 22 and 23 will be in the building on Saturday. So a good showing would be nice. There were a lot of recruits at the Cotton Bowl last weekend. For a while, it was awesome, and that had the chance to be a sort of program-building type of win for Steve Sarkisian, and then it all, of course, fell apart. This is another opportunity for that. Oklahoma State undefeated, number 12 in the country. One of the biggest games in college football this weekend in terms of like ranked versus ranked. I think there's only 2 ranked versus ranked matchups in college football this weekend, if I'm not mistaken. Georgia's involved in the other one. I'm looking that up. I'm filibustering. But still a big game, 11 a.m. on Fox, national TV. A lot of people will be watching a big one. You want to get this one. You want to look good for your recruits. Georgia and Kentucky. That is where game day is this weekend. That's your other ranked matchup in college football. And Georgia's a 22.5-point favorite. So I don't think that game's going to be close. This might be the most compelling game in the country this weekend. Not a lot of greatness on the slate. Baylor BYU will be an interesting one, though, in Waco. Curious to see how the Bears look. That, of course, is Texas's next opponent after the bye next week. But, yeah, big-time recruits coming to town this weekend. Some depth chart changes. We'll get to those in a second. Hey, there he is. Fanatic Perspective. Steven, what's up, man? Definitely check out that channel. Subscribe over there if you haven't done it yet. 90 recruits were in Dallas, according to the TV broadcast. God, look, if you're an offensive recruit, like that could have still been an okay day from a recruiting perspective. Obviously, you want the win. That goes without saying. But if you're an offensive recruit, you're picturing yourself in Sark's offense thinking, whoa. And if you're a defensive recruit, you're like, I can go play right away there. Those guys suck. I can be a true freshman and get some PT in Austin next season. So, look, once again, you'd rather get the win. That's a very positive spin, and I'm not positive spin, moral victory guy. Y'all know that, but maybe there's something there. Keep hearing that OSU has a good defense. What powerhouse offenses have they played? Nobody. Texas has the best offense that OSU has gone up against this season, but Baylor's done some good things. They were undefeated before that matchup. Kansas State has some good offensive players. Now, Skylar Thompson was out for that game against Oklahoma State, but they still have Deuce Vaughn. Boise State's decent. Hank Bachmeier, their quarterback, I think he's extremely overrated, but he's a decent player. But to answer your question, Frank, like they haven't gone up against anybody as good as Texas. But Oklahoma State's defense was really good last year, and they've got a bunch of guys back from 2020. So, like, I think I'm hanging my hat more on that than I am what I've seen from them over the first 5 weeks of the season. Like, I've seen this defense be really good for more than a 5-game sample size. So that defense is stout. It's one of the better defenses in the Big 12. Now, I would have said the same thing about Oklahoma, and Texas put up 48 points and 500-plus total yards of offense against the Sooners at a neutral site last week. So hopefully with Sark, hopefully good Casey Thompson comes back. He was awesome against OU. Hate wasting a 5-touchdown, 0-turnover performance from that guy. But hopefully we see that version of Casey Thompson and not the version of Casey Thompson we saw in Fort Worth 2 weeks ago. Because, Oklahoma State's going to do whatever they can to stop the Texas running game. Yeah, I'd love to see PK do a better job as well. Big test for PK. I'm not closing the book on him, but needless to say, last week was a disaster. 32 points for Oklahoma in the final 16 minutes of that football game. Of course, they went for 50-plus, 600 yards of total offense. They got punked by a true freshman quarterback who didn't even play his senior year of high school. That was bad. And they couldn't stop the run, too, right? Kennedy Brooks went off against Texas, 200-plus. And the Texas D-line, which was supposed to be a strength of this football team going into the season, has been anything but. And now they're banged up with Jacoby Jones being out for a while. So, would love to see some adjustments from this defense. The secondary needs to not be space cadets when the ball's in the air. The D-line has to be better. Every linebacker besides DeMarvion Overshow needs to be better. The tackling needs to be, everything needs to be better on this Texas defense. The good news is Oklahoma State's offense is not as good as Oklahoma's offense. But, Texas was horrendous defensively. If they play like they did last weekend, then Oklahoma State's offense is going to look pretty good in Austin on Saturday. Injury stuff. We talked about Jacoby Jones a couple of times. Of course, no Jordan Whittington. Some interesting nuggets from the depth chart that was released by Steve Sarkisian early this week. Jordan Whittington's out indefinitely. We know that. That's just another knife twister from what happened last week at the Cotton Bowl. Jordan Whittington out for a while with a clavicle injury. Marcus Washington inserted as a starter in his space. So you've got Xavier Worthy, who's awesome. You've got Joshua Moore, who finally made some plays last week against Oklahoma, and Marcus Washington as your 3 starting wide receivers on paper going into this matchup. And that, I think, is going to be the case for the next couple of weeks until Jordan Whittington comes back. So need more from Marcus Washington this week. And moving forward, Alfred Collins has been moved to jack end to replace Jacoby Jones. Alfred Collins had a really good week last week, had a sack, had another quarterback hurry, I think 3 tackles in the game against Oklahoma. I want that dude on the field. So he's moving from inside to outside to replace Jacoby Jones. You don't have a lot of depth on the edge now. I think Jet Bush is second on the depth chart behind Alfred Collins at that jack end position. So, hopefully Alfred Collins stays healthy and can make some things happen, but you don't have a lot of depth there. Maybe they move Moro Ojimo to the outside at times because it's hard to call it a strength. They haven't been very good, but in terms of bodies, you've got more bodies on the interior of the defensive line with Coburn and Ojimo and Sweats, and Byron Murphy's been playing some good football too, the true freshman. So maybe if you need some more depth on the outside, Moro Ojimo shifts back to the outside. He's played some on the end during his Texas career. Maybe PK tries to do that a little bit this weekend. Maybe he just goes with less defensive linemen on the field. Problem is you don't have a lot of linebackers either. So I'm not excusing PK from some of the defensive performances we've seen from this team this year, but not as much depth on this roster as I would like, and I know as he would like. Hopefully there's less depth this year on this team than there is in any year moving forward with PK, but look, he still has to figure it out. Coaches are problem solvers, as my man Rod Babers would say. PK's got to find a way to solve that problem. Everybody deals with injuries. Texas is no different. So that's a depth chart nugget for y'all. And then on the offensive side of the ball, the offensive line has been shifted. Andre Carrick is out. He got benched. He was awful against Oklahoma. I think he can be a decent player. We've seen some good from Andre Carrick during his Texas career. He was great in the K-State game last year, but he was terrible. He got pushed around and beaten a lot by the Sooners. So he's back to the bench. Derek Kerstetter, who played left guard last weekend, goes to right tackle. Junior Angalau, who played right guard last weekend, goes back to his original spot at left guard. Of course, no Denzel Okafor. He's out for the season. So Kerstetter back at right tackle. Junior Angalau back at left guard. And coming in at right guard is Tope Amade, who's been here forever. We haven't seen him start a lot of football games during his Texas career. I don't know how many starts he has during his Texas career. If anyone knows, feel free to comment. But we'll see what that looks like. I'd like to think the Texas offensive line can't look worse than what they looked like in the second half against Oklahoma, because they created 0 holes for Bijan and had 3 horrible penalties at the start of drives in that second half against the Sooners that really led to the offense only scoring 10 points and playing behind the chains for the most part in the final 2 quarters at the Cotton Bowl, and obviously made life tough for the defense as well. I'd like to think the O-line can't look worse than what they did against Oklahoma, but they look god-awful against Arkansas too. So who the hell knows? That group they're not a strength. They're not good. Can they be average? Average is fine, I think. But Oklahoma State's defensive line is pretty solid too. Not as good as Oklahoma. They don't have as many Sunday players up front as OU does. But once again, OSU still has some dudes and some experience on that defense. Some really good linebackers too. Really like Malcolm Rodriguez, the leading tackler for OSU. He's going to wreak some havoc on Saturday. So there are your depth chart changes. Everyone's curious to see what this O-line looks like. Can they bounce back after what they looked like last week? I agree with the decision, though, to bench Andre Carrick. Just looked in over his head last week. Carrick's best position, I believe, is left tackle. Maybe it is. Maybe it is. Christian Jones is doing okay there right now. Hit and miss, inconsistent this season, but I don't think he's played poorly enough for you to bench him at this point. I don't know. We'll see what Kyle Flood can do. It's probably the right move. Hopefully Tope Amade can show us some things. He's been there forever. Hopefully he's got something in the tank. All right, guys, I got like 2 minutes left. I'm about to go record the 1-0 podcast with Joe Cook of Inside Texas. Definitely check that out. Part of the Everyone Gets a Trophy podcast channel. So search that. Everyone Gets a Trophy wherever you get your podcast. You can listen to our pod and also Kevin Dunn and Paul Wadlington, a.k.a. Scipio Tex from Inside Texas. I think they already released theirs this week. I need to go back and listen to their pod. But Joe and I's podcast will be dropped tonight, so definitely be on the lookout for that. We'll recap Oklahoma, and we'll preview this weekend's matchup against Oklahoma State. So a couple of minutes. Texas basketball talk coming soon. Less than 4 weeks away from college basketball season. So we'll talk plenty of Texas hoops on this channel, not because Texas football is bad or anything like that. And hopefully we're not like, okay, we're all done with football. Let's focus on basketball. Hopefully it doesn't get to that point. If Texas loses this weekend, there might be some fans who are about done with this team again. Hopefully we don't get there. Play more Alfred Collins. He's going to start this week, Robert. You will see more Alfred Collins. I'm trying to think what else I need to talk about. We'll do a video tomorrow, more preview, maybe score predictions, key matchups, key players, and expectations for this game between Texas and Oklahoma State. Absolutely, Steven. We need to and we will make a Texas hoops video together. Can't wait for Texas basketball. Curious to see where they start the year in terms of the AP Top 25. More curious to see where they end the year in terms of the AP Top 25. Excited about Chris Beard. I think every Texas fan is. All right. I think that's going to do it for today's video, guys. Scrolling through the comments one last time. If you're not watching this live, comment below with your thoughts on this video, on this channel, whatever you want to hear from me. And also your thoughts and expectations and predictions for Texas and Oklahoma State coming up this Saturday at DKR. Texas a 5-point favorite. I'll give my official prediction tomorrow, but I'll give you all my lean right now. I think Texas is going to win this football game. I do. I think they bounce back. I'm borderline. Like, I think it's going to be one possession. I think it's going to be a close game and highly contested for all 4 quarters on Saturday. I'm like in between a field goal and a touchdown right now. So I think Vegas has it dead on by having the line at 5 points right in the middle of that. But I'm leaning Texas right now. Do a little bit more film study and some more research on Oklahoma State tonight and tomorrow morning before tomorrow's video, and I'll give my thoughts there too. So, all right, guys, thank you all for watching. Once again, please like this video, subscribe to this channel, subscribe to Fanatic Perspective as well. Steven, appreciate you stopping by. A great video today. And tap that notification bell too so you are informed whenever I drop new content. Quick shout out to Last Stand Hats, today's video sponsor. Use code BK10 at checkout for 10% off your purchase. All right, guys, appreciate the continued love and support. Until next time, y'all stay safe, y'all stay healthy, and hook 'em.